was mid-October, and I had started having some belly pain. And it wasn't that bad, it just kind of came out of the blue, and I didn't think much of it. But by the fourth day, it had become severe. And Doug was actually out of town running the Chicago Marathon, actually. But he came home and he saw me in bed, just in pain, and he said, "We're going to the emergency room." So we went to the emergency room, but had no idea that this is what we were going to find. And when we got there, the emergency room doctor just had run a slew of tests. You know, when a woman comes with belly pain, you just have to do a bunch of testing. And so we're like, okay, they're doing an ultrasound, they're doing a CAT scan. This is just routine. But when the ultrasonographer had done my ultrasound and called in the radiologist because she had found something, that's when I knew that something was wrong. And then after that, I had a CAT scan, and the emergency room doctor came in and said that they had found some masses on my CAT scan and that I needed to be admitted. And within a few days, we found out that it was cancer. My doctors had done some biopsies of these masses, and they knew it was cancer, but couldn't tell anything out, you know, what kind of cancer it was, you know, where it had started. And I was transferred to Northwestern Memorial Hospital in Chicago, which is one of the best cancer centers in the country. And after about a couple weeks of testing, they still weren't able to figure out what sort of cancer it was. That these cells, to explain it kind of in layman's terms, these cells were just dividing so rapidly and just looked so bizarre. They just couldn't tell, you know, what type of cell it was, you know, where it started in my body. You know, they couldn't give us a diagnosis. So, but it had also spread to my lymph nodes in different parts of my body, and so they knew that it was stage 4, which is metastatic cancer. So my doctor had told us that so they sent those tests off, and maybe a week after I had started chemotherapy, those tests came back and it wasn't that type of cancer. So we were just emotionally, it was just very difficult. We were hoping for some answer, you know, to give us some direction, and to give our doctors some direction as to how to treat this so that I could live. And there was just nothing, you know, there was just no way. They did every test that they could, every test that exists, they did. And, you know, these are some of the most brilliant doctors in the country, and even with that, we couldn't find an answer. But at the same time, we knew that God knew, you know, that He made my body, that He knew every part of it, and that, you know, this was not something that eluded Him, even though it eluded everyone else. So, so even then, we knew that, you know, our hope was in Him, and that even, you know, our hope was not in the best medical care that this country and this, you know, had to offer. Our hope was in the Lord. And we have a God who is able to do it, and that we have a God who is good, and a God who loves us. And you know, I don't understand the ins and outs of healing, and you know, why He heals some and not others, how He does it, but I know that He does. And I think if we hadn't been in Nepal for those 4 years and had seen Him answer prayers, and if we hadn't seen Him heal people who were, you know, on death's doorstep and beyond what medicine there had to offer, if we hadn't seen how faithful and powerful He is with our own eyes, that maybe it would have been harder to pray those bold prayers. But because we knew who He is, we could go to Him and ask and seek and knock. And even before I'd started chemotherapy, my doctor had sat me down and looked at me and very honestly said, "We don't know if we can cure this." And so that was pretty devastating. There's so much anguish, when you have, I just look at my little ones with such sadness. But at the same time, God had been giving us such peace too, and such comfort during those times. But I'd started chemo, and beginning of December, I had a CAT scan, and we had no idea what it was going to show, and I had started to feel a little better, so we're thinking, okay, we're going to get some kind of good news, but we were sitting in my doctor's office and sat there for a couple hours waiting. And then she came in and said, the CAT scan shows no evidence of disease, that the masses in my belly and all of the lymph nodes that were enlarged, they were completely gone. And when the reason it had taken so long, and the reason we had been sitting there for a while, was because the radiologist needed to look at it a few times to make sure that they weren't missing anything, because this was just not what anyone was expecting at all. And when my oncologist talked to the radiologist had asked her, he said, "What did you give her?" And I just remember getting this news and looking at my oncologist, and then looking at Doug, and looking at her, and looking at Doug, and just being amazed. And that's what we had prayed for, but it was just beyond what, it's beyond what anything that we could have expected and what the doctors could have expected. And we were just amazed and elated. And I just remember going to pick up our kids afterward, and just putting Maddie in my lap and telling her, like, "Maddie, God has answered your prayers, Jesus has healed me," and she just let out a little tear. It was just the most wonderful feeling, and that I could look at my kids and just feel joy, and there was no sadness there anymore, and we're just so thankful.